All right. Good evening, gamers, and welcome to part 2 of Games with Dave Saturday double feature. Tonight, for episode 13, I am joined by Night Owl Publishing's own Ahimsa Kerp. Night Owl Publishing is currently kickstarting their Zine Quest 5 project, Old School and Cool Volume 4, the Undead Edition, which is 100% compatible with Old School Essentials. It's already funded and going until March the 3rd. Old School and Cool 4 brings your game to the final frontier of death and beyond, allowing your players to play an undead character via an undead class tree. Welcome to the show, Ahimsa. I'm so glad you're joining us tonight.
Thanks, Dick. I'm glad to be here.
So, what made you choose undead for the theme of Volume 4?
I'm always trying to think about a book that can kind of exist amongst other books, right? So if you write a great adventure, that's great, but then it's sort of competing against every other adventure that has ever been written. So I was thinking, what about a book that you could have that you could play it alongside just about anything else? And then I'm thinking, oh, it'd be cool, like character death. Some people are pro. I'm an old school gamer. I'm kind of a death at zero guy. But you can kind of fall on the spectrum there, how you will. But it's like it's kind of cool, like if you if death isn't the end, what if you can just be, that like Jason and the Argonauts has those great skeletons, or
Yeah,
zombie movies. Like, why don't we channel a little bit of that energy and kind of like keep these characters going even after they hit that 0 HP. So that was kind of the idea.
gotcha. That's cool. You kind of touched on zombie movies. What horror movies were an inspiration for this zine?
A lot of them, but actually also none of them, because horror movies are not fantasy horror movies. Like a horror creature is not the same thing as a player. So what I'm trying to say is, if you watch a vampire movie, Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola, that's not written. It's hard to game that movie. It's hard to find gameable stuff in that, because it's written as sort of like there's a villain and there's a story. But it's not like here's a power, here's a power, here's a power. Probably like anime would be a better source of actually mining those things. But the spirit of horror is definitely throughout. So I do like zombie movies. I like a lot of the sort of like the Witch I watched recently again, just to get kind of the vibes of that kind of thing. And I like the older movies, even like some giallo horror, which isn't directly undead, but I think some of those vibes as well can might be manifested in here as well.
Nice. The Witch is such a good movie. Or Witch. I
Like,
think it's just
yeah,
Witch,
yeah.
right?
Oh, you're right. You're right. Yeah, Witch or Witch. Yeah, yeah.
So speaking of the powers, can you give a rundown of how the undead class tree works and some of the dark powers that players can gain as they progress through that tree?
Yeah, definitely. So the way it works is depending on how you want to use the book. Maybe you want to have every character is this way, or maybe it's just like if a vampire killed your character, then they come back that way. It's sort of up to you how you do it. But once you do, there's sort of two paths. You're either going to come back as sort of a corporal undead or an incorporeal undead, and harder word to say and a
It
little hard to
is.
spell. I find as I type it out. The first choice you make is you can be, hmm, if you want to be corporeal, you can choose between like a zombie and a revenant. If you want to be non-corporeal, you can choose between a spirit and a white, and then it's going to kind of, as you sort of do things, you could advance to further as a skeleton. You can choose a couple things. You can choose, for instance, to be arrow proof if you want to be, because that's kind of makes sense for skeletons. They have a couple other powers as well, whereas if you're a zombie, basically you can't be killed unless you get stabbed in the head, right? It's like zombies famously have to be
Right.
bashed in the brain. So they have their own kind of like core set of powers, but then there's also these things that you can gain, and kind of from different ways, but I'm calling them involtuations, which is from a Clark Ashton Smith. I kind of wanted like some of that old school stuff, but they're essentially tiered powers, almost like a spell list in a way. And so, for instance, maybe you're a skeleton who is immune to arrows. That's every skeleton pretty much. But you can also choose maybe to stink like the grave, and people have to make a saving throw, or you can choose to have a cold bite or a necrotic touch or whatever. So there's going to be long lists of powers at 3 different tiers. So as you advance up, you kind of move on to more impressive powers. And I'm kind of cast a wide net for these. Like I looked in the old school essentials books, looked through like the rule cyclopedia, and then I've been there's no research like over research, no kill like overkill. I've just been reading as many old folklore books as I can and just kind of noting like, oh, undead have these powers. Oh, undead have those powers. So there's a lot of it's a wide net that kind of filling up these different powers.
Really cool sounding. I especially like the sound of the cold bite, almost like it's a death chill or something that
Yeah,
they're gonna
exactly,
get.
exactly. Right.
So you mentioned skeletons, and another thing I saw on the Kickstarter page was that you're producing tables that are meant for fleshing out skeletons and zombies for the DM.
Mm-hmm.
So what can the DMs expect from those tables that they can plan to throw at their players? I think I said that right.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so there's an actual we're calling it the undead monster generator, and you're just gonna roll a die, and it'll tell you everything. It'll tell you how many hit die the monster has, some powers that it has, if it has magic resistance or damage immunity or a fear or a all of these things are broken down on sub tables. There's actually as it stands right now, we have 11 of them, including even weaknesses. That's another thing that's built in as an undead. You have cool powers, but you're going to have weaknesses as well. So it's basically you drop a couple dice and you have a full-fledged undead creature there. You could probably do it at the table.
Nice. Where did I go here? Oh, here we go. One of the other things that I saw was that you're introducing some new magic items and new spells. Without giving too much away, can you kind of wet the palate a bit, maybe, and give an example of one of each that are maybe your favorite so far that you guys have designed?
Yeah, we do have some of those things. The spells, I don't think we've written any of the spells yet. We definitely have some notes. We've been talking about them, but trying to make sure that they're not too much like existing spells is a little bit tricky. There definitely will be some pretty good ones. We have some ideas. We haven't written them out yet, but I guess the idea is it's what you'll see from these spells is something that's not just like not just does d6 damage. Like we don't want to just do like a damage thing. There's plenty of spells that do that already. But B aren't just like aren't too similar to what you'll find in old school essentials or any sort of like D&D adjacent rules system. So they're going to be maybe more concerned with some of the mechanics that we have in the book. As to items, it's kind of fun. Items are I feel like there's sort of 2 ways you can do items. You can either have like a powerful item that comes with a drawback, and those are always fun as well because it's like, I want to use this cool thing, but it might hurt me. But we're also just gonna have like some um just like more like simple use items, like a rope that ties buried legs together. That's a real thing that people use because people were, historically concerned with vampires, so they would tie the corpse's legs together. So if you have that rope, then there's going to be sort of like a few mechanical things that can happen. There's also going to be some things like maybe like a cross filled with running water. Um, I'll tell you, I think the coolest item I have so far is right now it's called the lifeless dagger. If you stab somebody with it, they have to save versus death, or they instantly turn into a zombie. But if the dagger is pulled out, then they're back to life. So I feel like there's some player shenanigans are going to be possible with something like that.
That sounds so cool because it almost sounds like you could It would take some good rolls, but that you could use it within your party
Exactly.
to,
Exactly.
so that, we're fighting zombies. Now you're a zombie. Go get them.
Right. It's like the Shaun of the Dead bit,
Yeah.
right? Exactly. Yeah.
Great movie, by the way.
Yeah, that's so good.
Another thing that really jumped out to me was the necropolis that Wind is designing. What can play what geez, I'm tripping over my words here. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what players can expect to find there and what tools DMs will have within the necropolis?
Definitely, yeah. Let me just show you. This is the actual physical map of the necropolis. I know it's going to be kind of hard to see, but even just like that gate is so awesome.
That
I
gate
looked
is
at that and I
awesome.
thought, why would you ever go in there? Come on. So I think the necropolis is a playground. It's really just a setting. It's not an adventure, right? It's just here are the kind of things that you can find in a city of the undead. So yeah, the necropolis it's just full of like I mean, I guess the kind of things you'd expect, like the great power, and it is variable. You can kind of roll and see if it's the vampire or the ghost queen or the awakened zombie. There's sort of some options there. There's also these street gangs of the more the vulgar undead. Maybe like you might roll the Brotherhood of the Unholy Worm or the Corpse Crew, and these are just kind of the ruffians that are out and about. Places of interest like parlors, you could do some gambling, magical gyms. So and it goes on and on. Places you can drink, hotels, places you can stay, places where you can buy curses to curse people.
Oh, nice.
Um, yeah, it's pretty fun, and so it's really like it's just a setting that there's the tools for you. You know, as a DM, you can bring your players there, and it's just at that point, it's between you and the players. But there's a lot of stuff there, I think.
The Corpse Crew sounds very intriguing. I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah. Well, good news. Soon you can.
Yeah. Um, you actually, what you just said kind of brought another question to my mind, saying the necropolis isn't an adventure, but I know there is a mini adventure contained within Old School and Cool 4. What can you say about that currently?
hmm Yeah, all of our old school and cools have an adventure in them, and this one actually, we actually alluded to it a little earlier. Is It's about players who need to travel to the land of the dead, so they can either basically kill themselves and travel through the land of the dead as ghosts or spirits, or they can try to dress up like a zombie or like a revenant and hope hope that like the other spirits there don't like cotton on to the ruse, to that cunning ruse. So it's one of those sort of I think I wasn't consciously thinking of Philip Pullman, but I think like that whole like where Will and Lysa go to the land of the dead. I was like, oh yeah, that might have been in the back of my mind. I love the idea of like living people trying to traverse through undead. And of course, you don't have to be living, but the idea is there is this important item that must be required to save the world. You got your MacGuffin, but the point is that you're traveling through the land of the undead, either as living or as or you just make the ultimate sacrifice.
And there are a couple of my friends that I can see completely derailing the intent of that adventure and just the shenanigans that they would pull in the land of the dead.
See, I would argue, yeah, I would argue a derailment and shenanigans are kind of what you're hoping for, really. Like, yeah, here's the pretext, but if you figured out a better way to have fun, then as DM, I'm just gonna watch it. Like, that's great. Give me some popcorn and
Yeah, I can foresee a lot of snort laughing at my group trying to get through that.
right.
Um, Boy, we're speeding right through my questions. The risograph cover is amazing looking. How many copies of that are going to be made? I mean, I know I need to make sure that I upgrade in the pledge manager to get that. And
Yeah, well, Larissa, we're actually have here. He's been messing around with like maybe printing it on colored paper as
oh
well.
wow.
So we're kind of like going through a lot of these different options to see what one really pops the best. The one that we have on the Kickstarter right now is more like this one. There's going to be as many copies as people back, so it's not a limited tier. So anyone who wants it can get it. It's just a matter of upgrading in the backer kit, and you'll get it. We have more and more people who don't get the risograph are saying that they wish they had. Like, I think in general, those riso covers are really nice. They just take a little more work. Like we go down. There's this cool place in Portland called the Independent Publishers Resource Center, and you could go down there, and they have like cutters and riso printers and everything. So it takes a bit more, but I think it's worth it in the end. Like I think those zines look pretty cool.
Yeah. Ever since I didn't upgrade with Deluge, I wish I had. It's like I look at that Risso cover and I'm just like, oh my goodness, I wish I had upgraded on that one.
Right, I have some space from here too. Like I like the
Oh,
space from
wow.
for this looks cool, but the Riso cover is like maybe even better. Like so, like there's no wrong choice, I think. But yeah, with Deluge especially, I do love that skull as well.
Yeah,
Riso skull.
that was such a cool cover. Um, Also in backer kit, will backers be able to add on old school and cool 1 through 3?
Yes, absolutely. We actually just like an hour or two ago, we just added that to our FAQ because we were like, oh, we should have addressed that. That's really our bad. But yeah, we wanted to keep our tiers simple and not be like, this tier is old school and cool one. This school is old school and cool one and two, and one and two and three and two. Like that gets too complicated. So there'll just be a backer kit store at the end, and you can add whatever of those old school and cools you don't already have.
Nice. I definitely want to pick those up. 2, I believe, was the futuristic, like cyberpunky one that I definitely want
Yeah.
to get.
Yeah, our working title for that was kind of like riffs, but not riffs.
Well, I've got a couple questions left, but I wanted to see if there was anything that we haven't touched on yet that you would like to speak about.
Is there? I think you've actually asked about kind of all the things I wanted to talk about. We've kind of covered almost everything that's going to be in this thing. I guess one thing I would say is one of the challenges of writing this is undead exist in folklore, and undead exist in D&D, and it's a little bit different. And then undead exist in old school essentials even more specifically. So, for instance, the shadow in old school essentials is specifically not undead, but you would kind of think it was. And in D&D, like in the monster manual, it is. So one of the things I've been having to do is sort of like or assumed power. Like if you play D&D a long time, there's a huge difference between a ghoul and a ghast, but they're actually just folkloric. They're synonyms. They're not different creatures. They're two words for the same thing. So one thing I've been trying to do is sort of balance people who know these monsters, who are like know that a wight or a wraith maybe is more powerful or less powerful, with the need to sort of make it at a player level as well, and also at a level that can kind of scale. So that's been the most fun challenge of this so far, and I've actually had to sort of invent new undead to sort of really like perfectly occupy the role, the spot that they need to be. So for instance, there is now a barrow walker, which is pretty cool. They kind of use like the power of their ancestors, I guess you could say.
It is cool.
And then the other one that I think is kind of cool is the crypt lord. There is a crypt fiend and a crypt thing, but they're not really a crypt lord. And the crypt lord is basically the guy who goes like, rise, rise, and then like all the
Nice.
skeletons and zombies come up. And
That's awesome. So given you aren't doing any stretch goals, I didn't quite catch it. What kind of turnaround time can backers expect for Old School and Cool 4 and when it'll be landing in their mailboxes and approximately?
yeah, the date that we have is June. So that gives us time to finish writing it, finish the art, get it edited, and then get it printed. Um, so June kind of sounds far away now, but it's also already February, so
Yeah,
it's
it's
kind
only
of
4
like,
months.
yeah. And often now, I will say, on Into the Space one, we were a month late now, but often we will get things to people a month early as well. It has happened as well, so kind of depends on how things go with the printer and that kind of thing.
Nice. Well, I can't wait to get it. So June cannot come soon enough.
Yeah,
For
I mean,
multiple reasons. It gets me out of the cold spell that we're in, and then I'll have Old School and Cool 4.
yeah, in the Northern Hemisphere, June's a nice month for sure. It's
Yeah.
one of the better months.
So really my last question is, what would you say to anyone that's still on the fence about backing Old School and Cool 4?
I'd say, first of all, weird that you're watching this if you don't already like it, but you do you. But secondly, I think that even if the idea of playing as a skeleton or something that doesn't excite you, or having this sort of undead necropolis, there's still tons of mineable stuff. I mean, I think honestly, most of us these days, we buy something to pick a thing or two out, right? Right. Okay, I'm going to take that idea. Okay, I like that idea. We don't necessarily use the whole book, but I think this one is full of kind of mineable content. So even if you aren't planning on running a full Ravenloft dark campaign, there's going to be stuff in here that you can use at your table.
Excellent. Well, is there anything else that you would like to add? I know I already kind of asked you that, but I feel like
No,
I feel like
yeah.
this went really quick.
I know. I felt like I was talking forever on these answers, but maybe I should have put in more adjectives or something.
No. Well, really, that was all I had, my man. And if you don't have anything else that you would like to add in, I'd love to have you add more if you'd like. Or, all right.
Yeah, I got nothing.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight. And I hope this Kickstarter winds up really kicking some ass for you guys. And I hope that everybody that is listening has either backed it or will back it soon.
Yeah, figure